appeal service for us, and we thought it'd be a really good opportunity to get you on the sofa, on the chairs, to discuss continuing healthcare and to explain it, because it is a complex situation. So do you want to just explain a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a solicitor. I've been doing this for about 12 years, I think. Well, I've been practicing for 10 years now. And my background originally was in professional deputyship, so managing finances for people often with complex brain injuries. So I come from that sort of background, mental capacity area. And then I moved more into supporting deputies, lay attorneys, and care advice for lay attorneys and lay deputies. So that's really how I ended up in this area, so navigating both social care and continuing healthcare. And then obviously I've moved across here to focus on that.
So you've got quite a broad experience of working with private client and working in that deputyship arena with court protection. And then from there moving over to supporting lay deputies, because we see quite an issue with lay deputies. They ring us up for advice. Lay deputies sort of, you know, how do we do this, how do we do that, and we try to give them the best support we can, or we direct them to solicitors and things like that. So we know that there's that need there for lay deputies and lay attorneys.
Yeah, they need a lot of support, I think, because often people will focus on just getting the appointment in place and then leaving them to it, when actually they need a lot of help.
I think there's that. The part that you're thinking about is it's only managing mum's money. Also, I've got to do is make sure that her care fees are paid, or I've got to make sure that the house is rented out, or the house is sold. And we do, as adults, we do those things on a normal basis. We make sure our own bills are paid, we make sure that houses are paid for, but then things like continuing healthcare and local authority jump in.
Yeah, people often don't realise that they are supposed to also get as much state support as they can, you know, that they're entitled to get, that they should be doing that as an attorney or as a deputy. So that'll often be overlooked, or they'll just think, you know, oh, this is what I would do with my money, so that's what I'm going to do with mum's money. And
I'm not saying it purposely made complicated, state funding options, but we see with benefits and PIP and things like that, when we've supported people with that. The application process is insanely complicated, almost to the point of the application itself is a barrier.
Oh, it's really overwhelming. And these people are often people, you know, if we're talking about parents, which is common, it'll often be people in their 50s or 60s looking after their parents, and they'll still be in full-time jobs a lot of the time. They'll have all their own commitments to be thinking about on top of
with the
having to then deal with this.
Population, we're assessing capacity for parents in their 90s, and it's the children in their late 60s, early 70s ringing us up saying, I need my mum's capacity assessing. So that age barrier is getting further down the road as well. But we're jumping ahead. So do you want to explain what continuing, because there's the acronyms, DST, CHC.
There's all of these acronyms that people use. So
what is continuing healthcare?
So continuing healthcare, which people will usually just call CHC, it's a package of care which is fully funded by the NHS. So it comes from the NHS pot rather than the local authority social care pot, in effect. And it's for people who are assessed as having a primary health need. That's the key. Really, if you're assessed as having a primary health need, then that means...
That's a complication as well, though, isn't it? That terminology, primary health
need. Because everyone just says, well, what is a primary health need?
Well, my mum's got dementia, therefore that's a health need. So
unfortunately,
we get full funding.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's far more complex than that.
Even if you've had something that is obviously medical, such as a stroke, none of it doesn't. There's no illness.
There's no diagnosis that guarantees CHC. No. It's not about a diagnosis. It's about your needs and how complex they are, and how they are managed. And we'll get on to it, but there is a way of assessing it, basically.
And I'm right, and I could be well wrong with this. All right, I've always explained continuing healthcare as it almost dates back to things like the poor laws, because it was the local authority or the local council's responsibility to look after their poor and infirm. Then when the NHS came out, that kind of changed or got confused a little bit, because the NHS was free at the point of access.
Yeah.
So we've got these two funding streams, haven't we? We've got the local authority, which have got responsibility to what was look after their poor and infirm.
Yeah.
And then you've got the NHS, which is free at the point of access. But the local authority, it goes back to, or the value of it goes back to poor and infirm. So if you've got if you're over a financial threshold,
yes,
then they don't have to support you.
Yes.
Whereas the NHS
have to
free
support
at the point
you.
of access,
if
doesn't
you're
matter whether you've got
entitled,
£1 billion in there.
Exactly. If you're entitled to NHS support, then it's not means tested.
No.
It doesn't matter how much money you have or what your assets are. It doesn't have any bearing on it at all. But yeah, I suppose the oversimplification is that the local authority have a duty to meet your social care needs. So if you have needs that relate mainly to social care, like you need help with dressing and personal hygiene, toileting, things like that, that are often more social care versus healthcare needs that can sometimes relate to a diagnosis, like a stroke or cancer, but not necessarily, then they can stray more into health needs, and then it becomes the responsibility of the NHS.
CHC and DSTs are that link between which is it? Is this local authority responsibility, or is this the NHS responsibility?
And there can sometimes be joint packages as well, just to complicate things even further.
Oh, and funded nursing care as well, just make it even worse.
Exactly, because there's basically a legal limit on what the local authorities are allowed to provide in terms of care. They're not allowed to provide things that stray into nursing care provided by registered nurses. They're not allowed to fund that care. They're not allowed to provide it. So in those cases, that has to be provided by the NHS. But even if you need care by a registered nurse, again, that still doesn't guarantee that you need CHC. You can have
requiring
both.
a registered nurse could be for administering
certain
medications, morphines, and things like that.
Yeah. So, but even then, you're still not guaranteed to be eligible for CHC. You could just be eligible for funded nursing care,
which is just a small
it's
weekly
like a
top-up.
yeah. So in those cases, you then have to. You're on the usual social care pathway. So if you're a self-funder, you have to pay for the majority of your care, but the nursing element is paid for by the NHS.
And let's be honest,
people don't often see much of a benefit.
You don't see any benefit of it.
People don't really. You know, the care homes are supposed to, well, they should deduct that nursing element from their weekly fee, but you do see it sometimes where actually they'll pay their usual. What we've seen is they'll charge their usual.
We're having to charge more now because your mum needs nursing care. So
they'll just charge their usual fee.
Normal fee is £900, and us providing the nursing care is funnily enough, £170 a week, which is what the funded nursing care
exactly.
Care
so sometimes you don't see any benefit of it at all, but that's really cheeky.
So, continuing healthcare is fully funded by the NHS if you get full continuing healthcare.
If you're assessed as having a primary health need.
I'm not going to try. Let's not complicate it with FNC and things like that. That's the idea, isn't it? If you get fully funded CHC, that's it. You don't pay for any of your care needs. If you're state funded, though, then you're either funded by the state, or you pay your own way. Yeah,
well, you're on that tiered structure, really, aren't you? If you've got assets over 23,250, you're a self-funder, and obviously that's complicated by property and what have you, which we won't get into for the purpose of this conversation. But you're a self-funder. You pay your own care. And then if you're underneath that, then you go into the local authority pays some of your care and you pay a contribution, and then forgive me, I've forgotten what the lower limit is, but
is it 13?
No, I can't. It's 14,250, isn't it? That's it. If you get to below 14,250, then the local authority pay for your care, and you just have to pay a small contribution based on your income. So it's meant to preserve your capital below that amount. So that is for social care, but obviously for NHS, CHC,
none of that matters.
None of it matters.
You could be
multi-millionaire, doesn't
Elon
matter.
Musk, As long as Elon Musk lived in the UK and paid national insurance somewhere. It'd be nice if he paid it somewhere, wouldn't it? But it's serious. I mean, he's got trillions in the bank now, apparently.
Yeah.
But if he was a UK resident, paying, he needed...
If
he
you're eligible,
was
then
eligible
you're
for
eligible.
CHC, he wouldn't have to pay for
It's
any
simply
care.
not means tested, so it's really valuable funding to have in place if you're eligible for it. And, you know, unfortunately it is often missed in a lot of cases. I think a lot of the time people don't realise that they can trigger the process to start looking into whether they're eligible for it.
We
it shouldn't be down to an
phone
individual.
call from a client several years ago. It wasn't from him, and if I'd been able to get contact, we would have been able to support him a little bit. It was from another professional telling us his wife had gone into residential care. He believed that he was then, because he owned the house, he was financially had to pay for his own care, pay for her care. So he ended up selling his house, moving into a bungalow to pay for her care. That then ran out of money, so he ended up selling the bungalow and paying for her care,
So
which
nobody
then
had
meant
told
he
him.
was in local authority housing, and then he needed care, and the state ended up having to pay for it, and he shouldn't have had to pay.
It should just never have
for,
ended up.
No, he should never have had to sell his house in the first place. And then when you look at it, there might have been a chance that actually she was entitled to continuing healthcare funding, so it wouldn't even come under. But just nobody was there to say this is what you need to do.
There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's also just, you know, it's so complex and it is overwhelming for people to navigate themselves a lot of the time. You know, I do this all the time, and I still have to check myself sometimes and go, oh, do you know what, I need to double check that, because it just doesn't, there's so many layers to all of it.
And it's okay,
all of the rules.
The idea of having to protect the NHS pot and the NHS monies and the local authorities' monies as well. And if you're not entitled to these things, then you shouldn't receive those things. You should, you know, if you're self-funding and you're not entitled to continuing healthcare, then you should have to pay your own way. It's as simple as that. But when CHC's missed, when local authority funding's missed, it can destroy people's lives, can't it? It can absolutely devastate people's lives. It's not a win to go, great, we've protected this money sort of thing, we've saved the NHS all this money, because in doing that you've destroyed somebody else's life.
Yeah, it's often missed, and you know, it shouldn't be down to the individual person to think, oh, I might be entitled to this, but unfortunately people should be aware of it, because often, you know, you should be able to rely on the nurses in the hospital or your social worker or the people in the care home to pick up on it and go, oh, this person ought to be assessed for continuing healthcare, but often they don't. So it is worthwhile, you know, getting the education out there, getting the word out there.
And this is so, because obviously we do a lot of capacity assessments for personal injury claims and deputyships for personal injury claims and things like that. So you've got clients that have received a large settlement. Just because they've got a large settlement doesn't mean that they're not entitled to continuing healthcare funding, does it?
No, not at all. Well, because
and
it's
the
not means
deputies have
tested.
got a legal obligation to make sure that not only that the process is followed, but followed properly as well. Yeah,
deputies and attorneys, they're expected to make the most use of any state support that they can get on behalf of the person that they act for, particularly professionals, because obviously they're held to a higher standard, they're expected to know more about this area. You know, I think some lay attorneys and deputies could be forgiven, certainly when it comes to CHC, because it's complex, for not really understanding that it's out there and that it should be explored, but certainly professionals should explore it fully.
Just going on the, oh, well, they've done a checklist, they've done a DST, they weren't entitled to it, that's it. That's not always going to be enough, is it?
No, it shouldn't really be about just accepting what you're told by, you know, the nurse assessors and the social workers who are going through the process, because the sort of service, I suppose, that you would get from the people involved can vary drastically.
Oh,
you know,
God, yeah.
I've been to DST meetings with excellent nurse assessors who've really sat down and they've thoroughly explained everything step by step to the family member, and I've thought this is a really good meeting. And then I've been to other ones where they've basically taken place in like a car park, and they've gone, oh, I don't think the social worker's going to turn up actually, but shall we just do it anyway? And then they'll try and rattle through it and go, oh, but we know what the answer is anyway, don't we? We don't really need to do this.
Yeah, I've heard that one so many times. I've already been through all the paperwork. I've already wrote out the DST.
You can tell when some of them have already made their minds up before they've gone through the process. And I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush because it varies drastically.
I've been to DSTs where I can remember, first DST meeting I ever went to, I was a student social worker, and the lady had multiple sclerosis. She had a team of, I think, 6 or 8 carers, PAs, sort of supporting her. She'd had continuing healthcare funding for years and years and years. This was just a review to agree it to go on. And we spent an hour going through this DST and got to the end, and the nurse said, so we're all in agreement. And we went, yeah, it's kind of cut and shut. And she went, so we'll be pulling the funding. And we went, what? And she said, well, all of her care needs are being met, so therefore she's not entitled to it. And we went, sorry, what do you mean? And she believed that because the carers were there supporting her, she then wasn't entitled to it. So thankfully I had a very good social worker with me, and they said, well, can we organise another DST for when this is not happening? And she said, yeah, that's fine. She says, okay, well, we'll go call the carers out, and then can we organise another DST in 10 minutes? And eventually we got her to understand that if you pull the funding, you pull the care, it doesn't work. It's
a concept in CHC called a well-managed need, where just because a need is being well-managed doesn't mean that the need doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's a need that's being met.
But then I've been to a DST in a different county and walked in and gone, I know for a fact this person is not entitled to continuing healthcare. I know they're not in any way, shape or form. And walked in and the nurse assessor's gone, before it's even started, I think we've already in agreement that it's fully funded. And you sat there going, okay, I'm not going to argue, but I don't understand how you've come to this. I'm not going to argue for this. It's not beneficial to anybody in here for me to argue this.
Well, should we talk about DSTs? Because I feel like we're trying to skip ahead.
Do you want to explain the process a little bit?
So we mentioned primary health need earlier, so just to go back to that briefly. So primary health need, it's difficult to really box that into exactly what that means.
Do you want to explain what the checklist is? Or do you want to start?
Let's talk about what it is first.
Okay.
So primary health need, just very briefly, it's where your needs relate more to healthcare than social care. Is the oversimplification of it is basically if your needs are more to do with healthcare need versus social care needs, and there's all sorts of case law around it that we won't really bog ourselves down with as for this call.
I'm sure we can get a blog out on all that case law, though, can't we, Ruth?
Yeah, maybe. I'll put it on the list. But yeah, it essentially boils down to, are your needs more related to healthcare versus social care? And the eligibility process starts with the checklist, and that is, it's not a test so much, it's more of just a screening stage.
Yeah.
So your checklist is a very brief version of the decision support tool, the DST, which is the second stage. So the checklist is a much shorter version of the DST, where it's looking at the same care domains, the same parts of a person's care that they're assessing, but they're looking at it in a much more narrower scope, and they only give it 3 levels, so you can go A, B or C, and A is the highest. And the threshold for passing the checklist is very, very low, on purpose, because they say that they want to give anyone who may have not the chance of getting CHC the opportunity to proceed to a full assessment. So most people pass the checklist stage, assuming it's been done properly, but it's normally best done in a setting where you can assess someone's care needs over the longer term. So for instance, what you see quite regularly, what I've seen a lot of, is that someone will have the checklist when they're either in hospital or when they've just moved to a new care home and they've been there 5 minutes and they're all over the place because it's a brand new environment, and they're scoring really high on the checklist, and then that gives the family hope that, that looks really good that they're going to get CHC, and then actually in a couple of weeks' time when it comes to the full assessment, the DST meeting, they've calmed right down and they don't get it at all. They're nowhere near getting it.
A workflow process within the local authority, because when you're discharged from hospital, you go from the hospital social work team to a community team.
Yeah.
It then gets allocated to a local authority, a community team social worker. Their job is to go out and do a care assessment and continuing healthcare checklist and potentially capacity. And they go out and it all gets done. But you're absolutely right. You go out on that. If you're fortunate enough, I suppose, as a social worker, to go out within the first week or two of that person being put into placed into a care home, you've got no records to really go off because the care home doesn't know that person. But also, actually, like you said, they may be suffering with, still recovering from hospital treatments. They may have malnutrition if they've come from home to the care home, all sorts of different things. And then 6 weeks later, they're doing fantastically well
just
and
settled,
ready to go home.
They've just settled down a lot.
Or just calmed and settled because they've got dementia and their behaviours are pushing out. Yeah.
So the checklist, it's meant to be quite a quick part of the process, really.
But it's not always done at the right time.
It's not always done at the right time. You don't need to have a really thorough, in-depth review of all the records and things like that. It's designed to be a reasonably quick process, but it should be done at the right time. It should be done when the person is ideally a bit more settled in a community setting, either when they've been in the care home for a few weeks or when they've been discharged from hospital and they're back at home and just a lot more settled in general, rather than doing it when their needs are far more acute, because you're just assessing them at the wrong time. You're not going to get a proper picture of what they're going to be like.
And it's a poor failing in social work that we're being process driven instead of being person centred. And that's not what social work has never liked, working like that. We don't work like that.
No.
But I think in that situation we're kind of falling into a little bit of a trap there, maybe.
Yeah. But the checklist, really, it's just a screening stage, and it's not designed to tell you whether you're going to be entitled to CHC. All it's supposed to do is tell you whether you should go to the next stage, which is the full assessment.
I know you're desperate to move on to DST, but it's making me think, to be honest, actually that doing that CHC checklist too early, though, then causes greater issues for DSTs later down the road, because then instead of getting the CHC done 6 weeks after the person is settled at home and going, actually, no, your checklist is negative, you're not entitled to DST, CHC. One, you're building up false hope with families. But secondly, you're adding on to that DST list unnecessarily. The list to if that process was set that actually somebody has to be, the CHC checklist can't be completed for 4 weeks, 5 weeks until going home, then it would reduce the pressures on the NHS and the DST and the ICBs.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, that they would have fewer DSTs that they need to do. And it's also it's emotionally burdensome for families. A DST meeting, the full assessment, it's hard, it's emotionally straining for a lot of people to go through, because you're sat there and you're listening, you're going through in detail all the things that that your family member really struggles with, and all the problems that they have with day-to-day living, and it's really tough to go through that in real detail.
It is a pathologized assessment. It's
quite brutal.
This is what is wrong.
Yeah, this is what is wrong with your loved one. This is what they can't do, and that's really tough for people to sit through. And I've seen it quite a lot, where you'll get a checklist where you'll read it and it sounds like their needs are quite severe. They're having really bad behavioural problems, and then you'll get to the DST, and none of that will be present anymore. And it's not, and sometimes it's because it's a well-managed need, but often it's because the checklist was just done at the wrong stage. And actually, now that they're more settled, everything has calmed down a lot. So, you want to make sure the checklist is done at the right stage, partly because, it's great to reduce the NHS workload, but also you don't want to give families false hope. You also don't want to put them through the DST if they don't need to. It's
so strange, because in social work there's this this unwritten rule that if somebody's got a UTI, you cannot assess capacity, which is kind of rubbish, because it depends on what you're assessing capacity for. If it's to give them the antibiotics to take for their UTI, somebody's got to make that decision. It's ridiculous. So you can, but you wouldn't assess their capacity at that time for selling their house. So you would delay that. Yet for a continuing healthcare checklist, you might say, actually, the person's got UTI, we'll come back in 3 weeks' time. But I don't know, there is this, we'll go in and we'll do a checklist. You know, this is part of the process. I'm going out and doing a care assessment, I'm doing a care plan, do a checklist. That's part of it, sort of thing. I've ticked my boxes I need to tick. When actually it's not beneficial for anybody to do that. And it's strange that we have this unwritten rule to delay something that's as serious as a capacity assessment, but we don't delay something as serious as a continuing healthcare checklist.
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about it, because in some respects it's good that the checklists are being flagged and that people are going through the process, because sometimes they just don't get flagged at all and people just get missed and family members don't know to look for it or to ask for it.
You wouldn't, would you?
But yeah, I suppose being in the system is better than not being in the system if you've got any chance of getting it.
That's true, yeah. I mean, so DSTs, what do they look like? For anyone that's not been,
the meeting. Yeah. Okay, so if you pass the checklist stage, then you go to the full assessment, which I don't know if it's really got a formal name, to be honest. I think it's just full assessment, but people will sometimes call it DST meeting, which stands for Decision Support Tool. Sometimes they'll call it MDT meeting, which is obviously multidisciplinary team. But that is effectively the full assessment.
Now, there has to be a local authority representative, don't they? I'm not going to say social work.
No,
sometimes it's not.
So the minimum requirement is that there has to be 2 professionals from different disciplines to form the MDT. So the MDT are the 2 professionals who are basically the decision makers in the meeting, and that should be someone from the NHS and someone from the local authority. So usually it would be a nurse assessor and a social worker. It doesn't have to be a social worker though, it can be, I've seen
community
it be
care officers, a social work assistant.
Social work, like someone training to be a social worker. As long as it's 2 people from different disciplines, and ideally they should know the person that they're assessing. They should have been involved in their care to have some understanding of what they're talking about, the background. Yeah, you're laughing because most of the time they don't. They'll just pull in any old social worker who they can get hold of.
My principal practitioner literally walking into the office going, I need somebody to go to a DST this afternoon. Can anybody squeeze it into their diary? And we had no idea. I mean, the workload was so
I know.
massive.
I don't hold it against the local authority. I
mean,
get it.
Generally, the clients that you looked after, you went to their DSTs. But there were these random clients that came through, and nobody had, it was the first contact we'd had with them.
But that is really important, that there does need to be 2 professionals from different disciplines, otherwise it's not a validly formed MDT, and technically the meeting is invalid before it's even started.
So, with those then, there is a high risk that person should have been, or could have been entitled to continuing healthcare, but because there's only been one person, it's not a critical argument, is it? It's just one person going, well, I've read through the notes and this is what I think.
Yeah.
So for professional deputies, for lay deputies, if they get that DST record through, and there's only one person on there, they really need to be challenging that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we'll come on to challenging it, but there's often 2 ways of challenging it. Well, 2-pronged approach of looking at it, and one is you need to look at whether there have been any procedural errors with the meeting itself, which that would be an example of, that it wasn't validly formed. And then there's actually challenging it based on the eligibility, which is that you just disagree with the decision because of how they've gone through the DST.
I'm going to just pick up on something you said there, because that the technical aspect, just because somebody fails technicality, this isn't like mis-selling car insurance or something.
No, it doesn't guarantee anything.
Yeah, if an appeal body may turn around and say, yes, they mucked up here, this was technically
wrong.
Technically wrong, but
that doesn't mean
they still weren't entitled to continuing healthcare. If they'd followed this process correctly, they still wouldn't have been entitled to it. So therefore,
absolutely.
You're not getting anything.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
A technical failure doesn't mean that that's it. You get reimbursed or compensation or anything like that.
No.
That's not how this works.
If only it did. No. All it means is that I suppose you have an argument for potentially asking for the DST to be redone.
Yeah.
But you've got to weigh that up, because if someone is very, very clearly not going to get the funding, there is no point in putting yourself through a second DST if you're going to get the same outcome
Especially,
at the end of it.
I think, if you're a professional attorney, where it's literally you're going to be charging your time on your client to go through that process, when actually you can see at the beginning from reviewing it that they're not going to be entitled to that continuing healthcare. So why spend that money? Can you justify that expenditure?
Well, that's because when I review DSTs that I haven't been to, if I'm reviewing the paperwork afterwards, I always look at it from the two aspects of, have there been any procedural errors here? And obviously I'm looking at the eligibility, and sometimes you'll see procedural errors, sometimes they're major, sometimes they're minor, but you can't go in all guns blazing and say, well, you should absolutely challenge this because, you know, there was only one person at the MD, there was only one person, it wasn't a valid MDT. Because you also have to think about, well, what am I going to get out of it at the end of it?
Yeah.
Because this person was plainly not entitled to CHC anyway. So let's not force them down a track that they don't need to go down.
No, just to slap the NHS on the wrists for not doing their job in the right process.
Yeah, you've got to think about it in a more rounded view, I think. But anyway, so the DST meeting. It's called a DST meeting sometimes because they're using a decision support tool. Now, that is a tool, it's a specific form that they go through where they're looking at 12 different care domains in minute detail, going through each one to give it a rating between no needs up to, in some cases, priority.
Can you list all 12 now for me, please?
Oh, don't do this to me. I can list some of them. We'll go through some of them. But yeah, it's a prescriptive form that goes through 12 different care domains in detail, and you give them a rating. It's supposed to be a tool that the MDT use to guide them and make sure that decision making is consistent. It's not supposed to be a tick box exercise, really, where you say, well, if you get a certain number of this, then you should be eligible, and if you don't,
point scoring.
It shouldn't be, but I think a lot of the time it is in practice. It's supposed to just be making sure that things are being reviewed consistently, but the MDT members are supposed to still use their professional judgment when using the DST form to guide themselves into thinking, does this person
have
a primary health need?
So like my lady with multiple sclerosis, they should have used, or the nurse assessor should have used a little bit of professional judgment there rather than just going, but her care needs are met. Yeah. They're supposed to use it to guide their own professional judgment rather than it being a tick box exercise. But having said that, there is an element of tick box exercising to it, because if you score one priority need, then you are eligible for continuing healthcare. Or if you score two or more severe needs, then again, you're eligible. So in those cases, it sort of is a tick box exercise because you're automatically eligible. But then if you don't have those scores, if you don't have the automatic eligibility, that's when it comes more into, well, now you've got to review it more rounded and think more holistically.
And just think, well, do all of these needs together demonstrate a primary health need or not?
And it's about unpredictability, intensity, and what's the third one? I can never remember.
There's four.
It's the four. I always remember those two. They always stick in my head.
The nature, the intensity, the complexity, and the unpredictability. So you're looking at the 12 different care domains, which I won't go through all of them, but it includes things like breathing, mobility, skin integrity, nutrition, communication, behaviour, cognition, altered states of consciousness. It's supposed to look at basically everything, but the final one is just other needs in case you have missed anything.
This is a little bit of if somebody's, let's take somebody with dementia. If somebody's got dementia and their care needs are essentially the same as everybody else's in the care home, and they're easily managed by the care staff, then they're not going to meet those criteria, are they?
It's unlikely. It's very unlikely.
If you've got somebody with dementia that is having episodes of altered states of consciousness, so
if they're passing
out, and then when they're coming to, they're going from being nice and sweet to being aggressive and angry.
Yeah.
And if that's happening at 9 o'clock every morning, then that's not unpredictable. But if it's just happening randomly through the day, then all of a sudden that starts to become...
Well, it's unpredictable, it's more complex.
So what I'm trying to say is it goes back to that, the diagnosis, the illness isn't really the thing, but you can, if that person's care needs are typical, I suppose, then it's unlikely they're going to meet that DST criteria, isn't it?
Yeah,
unlikely.
exactly.
Not
it's so hard
but...
to talk in definite terms about this because it's so person specific, and it always is. But you're right, it's not about the diagnosis, it's about their needs and how those needs are met, you know, and it's partly about...
That's what the MDT is looking for, though, isn't it? Is what are these things that are specific to that person that are, I don't want to say extreme, but it is, isn't it?
It's how challenging they are, it's how skilled the professionals that are looking after them need to be. You know, are you talking about a carer, just, this sounds awful terminology, but you know, a generic, well-rounded carer that normally cares for people? Can they meet that person's needs, or does it need to be someone with more specific training?
And I've seen this with dementia clients, people living with dementia, where they've moved into a care home, they've been fully entitled to continuing healthcare. Their behaviours, incontinence needs, all of those are so unpredictable, especially with behaviour, so unpredictable, really complex. And then a year later, their dementia progresses and all of those behaviours disappear because they're now bedbound, and actually the complexity of their care, even though their illness has got worse, all of a sudden they're not hitting the same complexity and intensity that CHC.
Well, I think that's important to say as well, that you know, I do have plans to come on to this, but if someone does get awarded continuing healthcare, it's important to know that that's not necessarily forever. It's not a permanent award, and I think families often don't realise that, particularly if they've come onto it from a fast track funding perspective, which we'll also come on to, but it will get reviewed, and obviously if someone's care needs change, then they're not guaranteed to have it forever.
That's the thing, isn't it? When we talk about care needs changing, it's in my head. Maybe I'm just really optimistic. In my head, when you say care needs changing, that means things are getting better. But actually, with something degenerative like dementia, it may be that the illness has got worse, which means that the behaviours, the intensities have lessened. So, what I suppose I'm trying to say is that loved ones can see their mum, their dad becoming iller, but actually worsening in their illness means that they're no longer entitled to continuing healthcare. And when you say that out loud, it sounds ridiculous. My mum got iller, so therefore she wasn't entitled to this funding anymore. It sounds ridiculous, but it's because they don't. Their care needs are easier to manage.
It can happen, unfortunately. So if you have clients that do have entitlement to continuing healthcare, it's really important to make them aware that it's not necessarily forever and that it will be kept under review. And that's not to say that everyone does get the rug pulled from under them, because some people do have this in place for a long time, or you know, until they die, but there's no guarantees.
I think for families and for professional deputies, having that understanding to then be able to monitor it a little bit, so you can go, actually, you know, mum's getting worse, or you know, the care needs are becoming more manageable, let's say it like that, because it could be somebody that's actually they're becoming better, you know, their illness is recovering slightly, but their care needs are reducing or becoming easier to manage. If you've started to see that, then actually you need to start thinking that the next review, actually, do we need to consider funding? Because if you're self-funding,
that
could end up in
you need to get your ducks
6 months'
in a row.
time. It's going to fall back on you.
Yeah, 100%. So at the DST meeting, once they've gone through those care domains, and they go through them in real detail, or at least they should. Don't get me wrong, in some meetings they will kind of try and fly through them, but they should be looking at them in quite extensive detail. And at the end of it, the 2 MDT members will go away and they'll have a chat, and then they'll come back and say whether they're going to make a recommendation for the funding or not. That recommendation then goes to the Integrated Care Board, the local Integrated Care Board, which is the ICB, and then they will pretty much in all circumstances...
CCGs, didn't they?
Used to be CCGs, now ICB, just to make it easier.
Yeah, so the ICBs look after the DSTs after the CHCs.
But they will pretty much in all cases ratify the recommendation that was given. But the DST meetings, I can't stress enough how important they are. Please, please, please go to them. If you're not confident, please, please, please get representation at them. If only just to hold the MDT to account. And I've said this to clients before, that it's awful to say it, because if you get representation at the meeting, I don't want people to think that I would go in there all guns blazing and say, right, well, I'm taking charge of this meeting now, because it's not about that. It's just about overseeing it and making sure that the person has been advocated for properly, that things haven't been overlooked, that they are properly... But you haven't
walked into a nurse assessor that's already made the decision.
Yeah, that they basically are properly considering everything, and standing up for someone if need be. But sometimes just having someone there, an independent person, actually just holds them to account to begin with, without even saying anything, because they know that they're being reviewed, basically.
First DST is agreed for 6 months, isn't it?
Well, you can be reviewed 3 months in.
3 months.
But that doesn't mean there's going to be another DST in 3 months' time. It just means that in 3 months' time they're going to look at your case,
but
basically.
Even 3 months. I don't like talking about money, but it's difficult to talk about funding without talking about money. But if your care fees are £1,000 a week, which is quite cheap, to be fair, at the moment. I mean, in London places maybe £2,000 a week. Let's say £1,000 a week. That's 3 months. That's 4 weeks of each month. That's £12,000 that you might have been entitled to. And it may be that after it's reviewed, that actually mum's got better, or her needs aren't as intense, and she's not entitled. But that's 12 grand that you've unnecessarily paid out for.
Yeah,
or if you're a professional deputy, your client has paid £12,000. If it gets to that review stage and it's agreed for the next year, that's £52,000. If it's 2 grand a week, that's £104,000.
Yeah.
This isn't a small, for the NHS, £100,000 is.
If you're going to be a self-funder, then it's worth making sure this is done properly and considered properly, 100%, because it's missed so often. And don't get me wrong, the threshold for getting CHC funding is high. It's not necessarily easy to get it, and I don't want anyone to go away thinking, oh, well, if I get representation, I'm definitely going to get it, because that's not the case.
No.
We can't change your eligibility. You are eligible or you're not, but you can certainly present your case as best as you can, and you can make sure the meetings are done properly.
No, and I think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's oversight.
Yeah.
And just having that independence of somebody there to say everything was done right.
Yeah.
We had a client years ago who he wanted to go to the local resolution, which I know we're going to touch on later. But we told him, look, your wife isn't entitled to this. There was some technical issues with it, and Louise, our senior social worker, supported him with it. But he just wanted to go. He said, I know, but I just want to make sure that I do everything right by her, and show that they should have done this properly.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That's fine. You want to do what you believe is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's that, isn't it? Is making sure that everything is done properly, and that there are no.
Yeah, and to be honest,
sometimes that's just as important as winning the money.
I say to people as well that it's not even about necessarily getting the funding. And if you are eligible and you can get the funding, then that's amazing. But it's partly also having the peace of mind that even if you don't get the funding, that you didn't miss out. Yeah. Because sometimes, most of the time people don't get awarded this funding. And I suppose if you don't go to that meeting and you don't go through it properly, there's always going to be that part of you that's thinking, but should I have got it? Was it done properly?
Yeah, because you're going to get Dave down the pub, who, you know, that Dave that sort of tells you that you can do your own will and things like that. And you're going to be down the pub, you're going to mention it to a friend. Dave's going to jump in and sort of go, oh, well, no, mate, she should have been entitled to that. And that is going to always play in the back of your mind. If you're able to turn around and say, well, actually, no, because I know for a fact that that I had professional representation there, this was done properly.
Yeah.
So, Dave, you don't know what you're talking about. Dave never knows what
you do.
about.
No.
Right.
Definitely don't take any pub advice about CHC.
No.
But yeah, let's talk about appeals, because we need to cover that as well.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Should have done a 2-hour slot.
No. We're good.
Appeals. So you've gone through the checklist, you've had your DST, you're not
successful.
happy with it, it wasn't successful.
Yeah, so if you are not awarded the funding after the DST, obviously that does not necessarily mean you need to jump down and start the appeals process, because sometimes that decision will actually have been correct.
Yeah.
If you've had representation at the DST, then you're more likely to know whether it was correct or not, and then if it was correct, then fine, put it to bed. And if that person's needs change in future, then you can revisit it. But if you're not happy with the DST or the decision and you know that you want to appeal it, then you do have options, and you'll be sent a letter with the copy of the full DST, and that will give you 6 months to appeal, to start the process.
That's to start it,
just
not
to
to go
start,
through it.
just to start the ball rolling. And your first appeal stage is the local resolution, which is basic. It's intended to be an informal meeting with your local ICB to talk about what you're not happy with, and whether that is procedural problems with how the DST meeting went, or problems that you have with the eligibility, things that you don't agree with, like evidence that you think was overlooked or misinterpreted, and why you think they should be eligible. And the ICB will basically talk to you about how they think it went, and it's supposed to be an informal way of coming to an agreement about what to do. I think sometimes they're unwilling to resolve things at that stage, but it really depends. It can vary a lot, but it's a really good opportunity to get all your cards on the table and see how they feel about it, basically. And if they agree, they can convene a new panel to look at the decision again. And then that obviously might mean that you get your eligibility decision changed, which would be perfect. That's the ideal solution.
Because obviously we've got Amy in the office doing educational healthcare plans, and one of the things that we see with that is where delays are put in place purposely, because until it's agreed, funding doesn't start. So there's no retrospective.
Well, that
with
isn't
this,
the case.
it's not the case, is it? So they can delay if they delay it.
If they agree that the DST was wrong and that they should have been awarded funding, then it will be backdated to the date of that DST.
Yeah.
So there's no incentive for them to drag their heels, but it is slow a lot of the time. I think it varies depending on which ICB you're dealing with. They're supposed to deal, if you say you want to have an appeal, you want to appeal a decision, they're supposed to deal with that within 3 months for the local resolution. If they don't, then you can start going down the complaints process. But that's the timescale that they're supposed to stick to.
Theoretically, from the date you receive that letter from the DST,
you've
to
got 6 months.
the end of the appeal with the LRI? Local
ICB.
Resolution Group.
Oh, right, Local Resolution
LRG.
Panel, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
LRG. I know there's another acronym. That should be a maximum of 9 months.
It should be if you wait until the end of your 6 months, yeah. And then if you don't get it resolved at the local resolution, they will then send you a letter saying that you can proceed to an independent review, which is a more formal process with NHS England, where they will convene their own hearing effectively to look at the decision again in far more detail, and you'll be able to submit basically a pack of evidence in advance, and they'll convene a panel with a chairman and all sorts, and they'll properly go through your decision. And in a lot of respects, that's almost the last stage of the process. It's not the last stage, but it sort of is, because that's the last stage where you can get a different decision on the eligibility. If you go beyond that, if they say, no, we're sticking with the original decision, then the last thing you can do is go to the ombudsman, but they don't make a decision on eligibility. That's really important. You would really only be going to the ombudsman to make a complaint about the conduct, how it's been conducted, and why there were errors with.
So theoretically, that you might have then been given the funding. You might then go, actually, I want.
Well, I mean, I suppose, you can still make a complaint.
Go on to ombudsman to make sure this doesn't happen to other people.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The ombudsman can recommend that they do a new assessment, and if they will pretty much always follow the ombudsman's recommendations. But the ombudsman cannot make a decision on eligibility. They can't overturn the decision.
Now, I know there's a percentage out on the internet somewhere that says that there's a certain percentage of appeals that win. Any idea what that is?
No.
Okay, no, it's fine, because what I'll do is I'll do a Donald Trump. A large proportion, a huge, a massive proportion,
beautiful.
the biggest proportion in the world of appeals win. No, but there is, and I wish I should have checked it before we came on. There is a large proportion of appeals that win, and it's something like 40 or 50% that go through to appeal.
Oh gosh, I didn't know
end up
that.
being positive. So I think if you have
Fumi's
got doubts about that appeal, it's important to at least speak to somebody.
It's important to investigate it, because you don't need to jump down the barrel of an appeal straight away. So if people, for instance, have come to me in the past to say, I've had a DST, I'm not happy with it, I'm not sure what to do, we don't go, well, let's go and appeal it. What you do first is review the DST. You have to properly look at it and say, let's have a look at your evidence, let's have a look at how it was done, let's have a look at the conclusion that they've drawn, and then I give an opinion on whether I think an appeal is worthwhile or not. And if it's not, then let's not do it.
That's really important, isn't it? Because there are providers out there, we won't brand name anyone, there are providers out there that will just go, we'll take it to appeal. Because, and then they charge, I mean, I think you said £14,000 somebody got charged.
Well, I had clients at my previous firm who were talking to me about certain providers they had used, who will go unnamed, who were just churning out,
and
the money.
If as professional, you have to have integrity.
It felt like they weren't advising the clients on what to do. It was more just give us your money and we will take you as far down the process as we possibly can, because it costs. And they're very much selling it as a private care costs tens and tens of thousands of pounds, and this doesn't. This will save you money. And to me, don't get me wrong, that's true if it's correct, but
give us £20,000.
But not everyone is eligible, so it's important to only take people as far as is appropriate for them.
And I think that's the thing that you need to make sure, isn't it, is that the professionals that you're working with have got some integrity at the end of the day. That they're saying to you, look, there's no point in you going down this route.
I wouldn't feel good about making someone. Pushing someone through an appeal that I know is not going to be successful.
There's a difference if you get like my client that came to us and said, no, I want to hold them accountable. I know I'm not going to win. That's a different discussion. But I think you need to have integrity in this field, because if not, you're potentially charging people. It's not a few £100s, it's thousands and thousands of pounds. It's a lot of money, because it's not cheap to do this sort of work, because it is complex, it takes a lot of time, it's a lot of reviewing of care records and medical records, so it is quite intensive work, but it's just making sure that people only go as far as they need to go. The key is starting with those reviews. Ideally representation, but if not, then a review. I know Fumi's trying to chivvy us on, so I'm enjoying myself. I do just want to very quickly want to touch upon re-ACC, because of our audience. It's probably relevant to a lot of them. The re-ACC famous case has meant that unfortunately professional deputies are not able to run their own challenges against continuing healthcare funding unless they get court permission.
I don't understand the logic of that, because it's basically because the court held that it was almost like litigation, which of course it isn't, because it's not an adversarial process. No. It's not a court process.
But it's up to the courts on what they say the rules are.
So just for professional deputies to be aware of it, that although we have said earlier, it's really important that you do consider this and make sure it's done properly, and that your clients aren't missing out on really important funding. But also, unfortunately, it's not something you can do yourself unless you get your court permission. So bear that in mind. Don't get yourself in trouble by doing that without being aware of it. So obviously, your options there are you instruct someone to help you, or you get your court permission to make sure that you've got the authority.
So let's say I work for a law firm. I'm going to be a solicitor for a minute. And I'm a private deputy, and Fumi, who's another solicitor in our litigation department over the other side of the road, can I pass it to her to do instead, because she's not my deputy?
No, you need to get...
It can't be somebody within the practice.
Yeah, that's certainly my understanding anyway.
Well, yeah, I kind of knew that, to be honest.
Yeah, that is definitely my understanding. I think a lot of professional deputies...
People, that's
I think a lot of professional deputies do this work for themselves, which is fine if they're comfortable doing it and if they're familiar with, the processes, because this is very complex. So it's making sure it's done properly.
Do it for themselves, can they?
As in, like, they'll do it if they get the court permission.
Yeah.
Like, if you've got the permission, then it's fine to do it. But it's weighing up the cost of getting the court permission versus just instructing someone else. Weighing it up.
If the DST's gone through, you've got 6 months to make the appeal process, and part of that 6 months is tied up going through the court
Getting
protection
the court permission,
to get that permission. You could potentially run out of time.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily.
Yeah. So just be aware of that. Yeah. Be mindful of it.
Okay.
What do you want us to do for me?
Has anyone got any questions for me? I know we're a few minutes over time.
I did have one more thing to talk about. If there aren't any questions, just fast track funding. So we were talking about the process, which is obviously checklist and then full assessment, which is the DST meeting. But there is another way of getting CHC funding, which is the fast track pathway. Yeah. So if someone has a rapidly deteriorating condition, which is entering a terminal phase, that's the phrasing that they use, then they may be eligible to get CHC without going through either of those processes. If they get a doctor or a nurse, there's probably other professions that can do it as well, but if they get a medical professional who's familiar with their condition, to basically sign off on the fact that they believe they have a primary health need caused by a rapidly deteriorating condition entering a terminal phase, then they will be awarded the CHC funding without going through either of these assessments.
So that's for a really short period of time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, again, it's reviewed within 3 months. Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm being quite sceptical here, but I've seen it quite a lot where people in hospital, doctors sometimes seem to use this as a method to basically get people out of hospital. Mm-hmm. And families go, oh, amazing, my father, my grandfather, whoever it is, has been awarded this funding, fully funded, amazing. And then 3 months later, because they actually haven't been through this full assessment before, then they go through the full assessment, and the MDT are going.
Gone from hospital to potentially a care home where their nutrition is up, their care needs are being met. 3 months later, they're not end of life. They're not on that terminal progress anymore, and actually they're doing better, and all of a sudden that funding's pulled.
It can be quite controversial the way it's handled. I had a case where the funding was pulled because they didn't say it in this many terms, but basically they were saying that she wasn't dying fast enough, as fast as they thought she was going to when she was first put on the pathway. They removed the funding and she died 2 days later. So
we've seen it the other way. We had a family member who was given fast track funding, and she carried on for another 2.5 years.
They carried on the
no,
funding?
No. They
Okay.
cancelled the funding. Yeah, no, absolutely. But she went into a care home. She got excellent care.
Yeah.
Kerry does life expectancy, and part of that is looking at the care needs and how they're met, because we know that good care provision increases life expectancy. So it's the same with that. And I think the other thing about fast track is you're saying to somebody, your mum's got 3 months left to live.
Yeah.
That's what you're hearing
really,
as a family member.
Yeah.
So it has to be really, I think, a lot more carefully used. That.
Yeah. It should be.
Yeah. We're now being beeped at. I think we'll and thank you so much. I know you were really nervous. You did amazingly well. I hope everybody enjoyed it. If anybody's got any questions at all, or would like to have a conversation with Ruth, or if you want to talk to me, I don't know why you would, but if you do, drop us an email at Nellie@nelliesupports.com, and we will get straight back to you. We have got Nellie on the sofa next month, but it is live at NellieCon in Peterborough, which is on November the 20th. I don't know why I keep saying the 19th, the 20th in Peterborough. We've got some absolutely fantastic speakers. We've got a couple of barristers coming. We've got Heleth Wynne coming. Who else? Fumi, I can't think off the top of my head. Gemma Hopper, Georgia Clark, who's from Peak Legal Costs for courts, officers, solicitors, people. I don't know. I always get the cost courts. I can't say it even. But they're going to be there. I don't think Nellie Supports is talking, which is nice. I think we've got 6 absolutely fantastic speakers. Then we've got the panel, which is our Nellie on the sofa, and we've got Sean McConnell from our Legal Guardian Services, Private Deputy Services. We've got Olga Sheladoni, Dr. Olga Sheladoni, who is from Nellie on Nellie Support. She's one of our capacity assessors. And we've got Kirsty Scott, the death planner. That's what she's called, and we're going to be having a little bit of fun and talking about some cool cases at the end of the show. It's great food. And Fumi, what's the code? Did we get a code?
CHC.
If you go onto Eventbrite, if you go onto Google and type in NellieCon 2025 and click on the Eventbrite link, or go onto our website and click on the link from there, when you get through to the payment screen, it'll ask you for a code. If you type in CHC, you get 40% off. 40%? Yeah, 40% off. So please do come. Ruth's going to be there at NellieCon. So if you want to grill her on CHC, you can come to NellieCon and grill her on CHC as well. We hope to see you all there, and we're back live on webinar in December. We're not filming Nellie on the sofa or NellieCon. You actually have to attend and see people face to face and drink coffee and eat cake with them if you want to attend NellieCon. We don't do that virtually, but we're back in December virtually with
Stuart Paris
from Nelson Solicitors. Oh yeah, sorry. Stuart's fantastic. He's going to be brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to that. Stuart's lovely. Yeah. So we'll see you all in November at NellieCon, and then for Stuart in December. Take care.